Hi, this is Richard Pearce from FinextraTV, and I'm joined today by Susanne Katus from Datamaran, and she's VP of Brand and Business Development. How are you today?
Doing well, thanks. How are you, Richard?
Very well, very well. Good to see you. I
Good to
enjoyed
see you.
our conversation we had recently, which is why I thought it'd be great for you to get online and chat to the Finextra audience today. Tell everybody where are you based, and a little bit about how you went on this journey to end up at Datamaran.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed our conversation as well. So I'm currently calling in from New York City. I have been based here throughout my entire Datamaran career. I've been with the company since day one. We were 2014. And really, our vision then and now has been to support companies on embedding external risks, including ESG issues, environmental, social, corporate governance issues, into key business processes, risk management, annual report oversight. So we do that working with mainly Fortune 500 companies. We're a global company, so majority of our team is either in the US or in Europe, London and Valencia as our key focal points there. And my journey to coming to Datamaran was prior to Datamaran, I was working at Global Reporting Initiative, which is the most widely recognized standard that companies use for ESG and sustainability reporting and disclosure. And while I was there, my boss, who is still my boss, Mariela Lacorte Ama, she basically sat me down one day and said, I'm going to teach you everything I know. I'm going to introduce you to everyone I know at GRI because I'm ultimately going to be leaving to start this company called, at the time, eRevalue, but we're now Datamaran. And I thought, well, that sounds very compelling, very useful, very practical. So ultimately ended up joining the Datamaran team not too long after that to help build the software analytics platform that companies now use.
Well, I hope in their succession planning risk system they figured out that maybe two people might leave at the same time. There was a third person they'd trained. Um, oh, fantastic! That's great to hear. So, I mean, risk is such an important part of the whole, ESG play. I mean, that's largely what it's about, I suppose. And we've heard from, Christine Lagarde and Mark Carney, certainly in Europe recently. Risk is at the heart of this whole area, and needing to have dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing based on dynamic data and forward-looking data is absolutely crucial. So when you look at the risk function and what you do, how do you actually say this is the problem statement of the market, this is where we are and what we think that we are trying to resolve for, and a little bit about the sort of where you are and what the journey is looking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. What we've seen is, and when we started, we always had the vision of working, with directly with CEOs, CFOs, chief risk officers. At the time in 2014, I think ESG issues were still seen as nice to have and not necessarily must have. 2020 has certainly been a tipping point for the capital markets in recognizing the financial impact of these types of external risks and opportunities. And, we finally see that CEOs and increasingly CFOs are waking up to this. And I think that's mainly due to the fact that investors are starting to place greater scrutiny on how companies are integrating these risks into their core business strategy, how they're disclosing information on these risks. Is this information within a standalone sustainability report, or is it actually consistent across your other important disclosures, your regulatory filings, your proxy statements, your financial reports? And so that's a really exciting opportunity. What we've seen working now with CFOs and chief risk officers is that a lot of processes to identify and monitor risk are very internal facing. They tend to be very operational. And then And in that way, they tend to miss, sort of those more emerging external systemic risks, things like diversity and inclusion, public health, climate change. And the traditional way of going about to identify those issues really is based on, manual desktop research or, asking a few subject matter experts for their opinions. But obviously, there are a lot of opportunities for inaccuracy. The process can be a bit backward looking. It can be incomplete. So really, the way we work with companies is giving them a much more tech-enabled approach to monitoring this external landscape and really focusing in on what matters most. Datamaran is the only software analytics platform in the world that identifies and monitors external risks, really using a data-driven approach. And it's exciting because obviously data speaks the language of various types of stakeholders, whether you be a corporate leader, a board member, or an investor. So it's really helping to make the understanding of these types of risks and opportunities, the financial implications tied to them, much more tangible, much more manageable, and much more measurable.
Yeah, let's come to the tech side of that later on, but that's a fantastic sort of setup for us. Give us a sense of, one of your customers or a scenario, if you will, so that we can sort of see the way that they use your service and data and, the kind of outcomes that people are finding as a result of working with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Datamaran's patented technology offers more real-time analytics on strategic risks, regulatory risks, as well as reputation risks tied to different external and ESG issues. The way that our clients use this is one, to scan the external landscape to identify what are the current and emerging risks that we as a company should be focusing on. So what they can do is take a very customized approach to looking at trends within their sector, among their competitors, looking at, what are the issues that are embedded within regulatory and emerging regulatory requirements within the key, jurisdictions in which they operate. What are the issues that are popping up in the media, international news in relation to their industry and their company? And with that, what they're able to really see is, across this external landscape, what are all of these external risks that we should be focusing on? But more importantly, they can also do a gap analysis and see, based on where we currently sit, based on where, the risks that we're currently disclosing, but also the risks that we've included in our risk register, where are the gaps? What are the new risks that we've yet to consider? What are the risks that we're looking at that we maybe need to update or continue to monitor? What are the other risks that, are maybe starting to percolate and we don't want to necessarily embed into our strategy just yet, but we want to keep an eye on because we see that there's some activity happening there. So through Datamaran, they get that gap analysis. But more importantly, as we've seen, in terms of 2020 and how what's financially immaterial yesterday becomes financially material today, they can monitor these issues over time, and they can do that in a systematic and automated way. So you really can have a more proactive view of how the landscape is changing, how different stakeholder expectations are changing, and how the issues themselves are changing.
And have you sort of got somebody who said, well, we were here and because of you, we're now there? Have you got any sort of gap that all leads to an outcome for a company that you can tell us about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the most powerful example that really speaks the language of our audience, CFOs, CEOs, is engagement with investors and the ability to, one, both, retain and attract new capital. So many of the companies that we work with have communicated their approach to external risk and materiality analysis as powered by Datamaran. And that has, one, forged greater relationships with some of their top holders. It's built trust in the process that they have. It's enabled them to take ownership of these types of risks and opportunities. It's also improved their rating and ranking on some of the most predominant ratings and rankers. For instance, DJSI. We had a client who just communicated to us yesterday that because of the process that they now have in play for Datamaran, they've been able to improve their score, particularly on the materiality piece on which they're ranked within the DJSI ranking. It's also built more trust and engagement at the board level. We're seeing, more and more pressure is being put on boards to have this type of expertise and understanding on these external risks and opportunities. And ultimately, these issues are communicated up to the board, the results from the Datamaran process. So that's also helped to build a deeper level of understanding and expertise at that level at the corporate entity.
Gotcha. I mean, I think people, are still adjusting, aren't they? Though, if you've had a lifetime as a professional to, I suppose, think about backward-looking measures, which come in once a year through corporate disclosures, and then you benchmark them against, a peer group. Suddenly, having all of this alternative and dynamic data coming in is hard for people. I've heard stories where people have said they've actually had to sort of back test it all and against the traditional method for them to see that the correlation works. I mean, have you gone through that kind of education and adjustment? Do you see that kind of comment in the market?
Absolutely. It's almost a form of change management, right? When you consider one, the universe of risks that you're looking at, but two, also taking, a data-driven, tech-enabled approach to support that. The benefit that our clients see here is the Datamaran process. We're very transparent about the methodology that we use. We don't want to operate in a black box. So ultimately, it's very clear to our end users, what's our actual approach to looking at these risks and opportunities, helping them rate those issues. And all of the data is downloadable. There's a fully transparent trail of information. So you have access to both the raw data and the source data. So what that's enabled our clients to do is say, here's our methodology. How can we take this information and translate it in a way that fits with our existing methodologies? And in some cases, change them to improve those methodologies. But definitely there is some sort of reconciliation, right, that takes place. But ultimately, if you can take all of this, because what we're looking at essentially is unstructured data, right? Alternative data, as you said, which in layman's terms is just text. We're looking at text and analyzing it in a quantifiable way. But the fact that you can get to numbers ultimately through that process, that's helped to streamline, smooth out, that change management approach that you were speaking to.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think you were, I guess you're sort of a born in the cloud company, or pretty much born in the cloud. So you're taking this unstructured data and using natural language processing, machine learning, etc., to ingest all of this multi forms of data, and then normalize it into these reports and data sets that you provide to your customers. One of the challenges we constantly talk about on this channel is that the industry, the financial services industry, sits there going, actually I've got too much data. I can't find correlation between the big data providers. I need standards. I need really it to be minimized to a few variables, not too many. I wrestle a bit with that because I know how much richness of information is out there, and you're testament to that. Do you ever come across that argument, and do you help people understand how they can consume your inputs, both as you've described through a change management process, but also just a data ingestion process?
Yeah, absolutely right. Ultimately, more data, it has a benefit, but ultimately, is that data meaningful, right? It gets to that question of how is this going to help me solve a problem or answer a question? And you brought up the concept of standards, right? Having a standardized approach. And I think in the ESG risk world, right, there's sort of this wild, wild west right now of trying to find some sort of harmonization when it comes to providing a standardized approach. But that's challenging. and it will take time. And the challenge with standards in particular, and this was actually written up in a very timely and well-spoken blog by Jean Rogers, the former CEO of SASB, one of the leading standards in this space.
Yeah.
And she rightfully said, standards are important, but ultimately it should never be the guiding principle for how a company goes about identifying risks and opportunities, for their company, or if they're doing due diligence on other companies, because they tend to be very backward looking, right? They go through a very rigorous process, rightfully so, to be approved. But as we've seen, the landscape changes. So it's not, as Jean Rogers said, the way to future-proof a company. So ultimately, thinking about how do we make that connection to providing a more standardized approach. This is where, the methodology at play for Datamaran is standardized. We're the first ESG tech company to secure a patent on the approach that we take to actually analyzing this information. So, that was important for us as a company because we believe in innovation, but we also believe in the robustness and credibility of our innovation. And then, the outputs that you use ultimately can be aligned with any of the existing standards if you do choose to, take a more standardized approach in the real, basic way of thinking about standards.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and I agree. I agree with your analysis very much. I've seen it in so many other worlds, tech world and so forth. Tell us, just to end with then, in terms of, this is where you are, this is what you're doing, and I'm sure it's all consuming and everybody's, very busy, but what do you see the future like? What next for you guys?
Yeah, so, the future, we obviously have had a vision at play since we started. And what's exciting is that we are seeing that vision really materialize now in the capital markets. We sort of see that the market has woken up to, not just an idea we've been promoting. There have been so many trailblazers as well who came before us that really wanted to see this true integration of these issues within companies. So what we're seeing and what we believe is the future is that the responsibility of these risks and opportunities are very much becoming the responsibility of the CFO. And that's great because I think that will bring a deeper level of rigor to this type of an analysis. The CEO, the head of strategy or audit, but also boards of directors. And I think ultimately, what the future entails is that these issues won't necessarily have to be labeled as ESG or external risks and opportunities, but they will just be seen as risks and opportunities as, current financial or more traditional risks and opportunities are seen. And, one of our clients from TD Bank spoke yesterday in an event that we hosted. It's really about enabling teams and leaders across the company to take ownership of these issues. And ultimately, that's what we see as the future, is that they won't be siloed, within a specific team or within a specific group. And that's where Datamaran is helping our companies, really achieve that type of integration. So that's where we're focusing.
Sounds great. Well, I think you end up with Satya Nadella at Microsoft always talks about the organization being a data-driven organization to empower people to make those decisions. So I think, you're very much an enabler of that. We'd love to have had you at our December event, sustainablefinance.live, because we're talking about this subject of risk, but I know we've got a clash on that date with another exciting event you're doing, which we won't do spoiler alert on today. But thanks for joining us today and sharing your thoughts, which, so exciting. And hopefully we'll have a follow-up with you soon. So for now, Susanne, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And yes, sorry to miss the event in December, but hope to be part of the next one in the spring.
Oh, for sure. We'll definitely be talking again.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.